Okay, the last section on Chapter 5 of Math Calculations for Pharmacy Technicians starts on page 99, and it's the apothecary system of measurement. Now, the apothecary system of measurement uses things like scruples, which are not listed in this book because nobody uses scruples anymore. It also lists minims, fluid drams, and fluid ounces, and for volume. And then the weight is grains, drams, ounces, and pounds. So on page 99, it gives you the equivalencies there. And they're kind of fun. You get to use these weird little symbols for minim. A minim. Actually, I spelled it wrong. Don't tell anyone, okay? Minim. And a fluid dram is 60 minims. That's 1 dram. We think of a dram as a teaspoon, actually. And then there are 8 ounces, or 8 drams, 8 drams, which we write using the apothecary and Roman numeral symbols. 8 drams equals 1 fluid ounce, and the ounce symbol looks like that. Now, if you're going to write this using cursive writing, the dram will look like this, or using printing. And then the fluid ounce looks like this. So how do you remember which one is which? A dram is really close to a teaspoon, and an ounce is bigger. So there's more bounce to the ounce. So that helps you remember the ounces are bigger. They have that little extra loop on top, so there's more bounce to the ounce. Okay, one way to remember that one. And so looking over at practice problem C on page 100, there are not as many of them. So looking at number 1 on page 100, it says a fluid dram and then Roman numeral 6. So we have FL dram, VI, 6 fluid ounce, or 6 fluid drams is equal to fluid ounce blank. So we had 8 drams to the ounce, 8 drams to the ounce, and we have 6 here, so we don't have quite an ounce. I'm not going to do this math in Roman numerals. In fact, it's much easier for me to convert this whole thing to 6 drams equals blank ounces. And we're using apothecary symbols, so we're not going to use 6 teaspoons to the ounce. We're going to use 8 drams to the ounce. So here's my conversion factor, 8 drams to 1 ounce. And I want to end up with ounces, fluid ounces, which is the apothecary one. So I'm going to put that on top. 1 ounce over 8 drams times 6 drams over 1. So now my drams are going to cancel, leaving me with ounces, which is what I want to solve for. So 6 over 8, or 3/4 of an ounce. Or I'm going to write it, you can't write it using this apothecary notion. You can. But we don't have a 3/4 symbol using Roman numerals. So it would have to look like this. So you can give me this answer. You can give me this answer. Either one is correct. Okay. Now keep in mind, you have to learn this for your national exams. but we don't use apothecary symbols in the pharmacy except for a few things like grains. Okay, so we will use grains in the pharmacy, and the reason we use grains in the pharmacy is because some drugs have been around for a very long time, more than 200 years in some cases, and so they were originally created using the system of grains, and so they keep using grains when they produce these drugs. And if you look on page 99, it says that there's 60 grains to a dram as far as weight goes. We do not use drams as weight. We might only use them as for liquid measurement. So one thing that we want to remember is what we talked about last week. 60 milligrams equals 1 grain, except for Tylenol or aspirin. Tylenol and aspirin, you're going to use 65 milligrams for 1 grain. Okay, so going back to today's calculations. One grain equals 65 milligrams. All of the other drugs, except for phenobarbital, are going to use 60 milligrams in 1 grain. And phenobarbital is a special case all on its own, and I'll tell you guys about that one later. I'm not going to test you on it because until we talk about it. I don't test on anything, hopefully, until we talk about it. And if I do, feel free to call me on it, and you will always get it correct. So on page 98, number 27, we're looking at a tablet of digoxin. A tablet of digoxin contains 250 milligrams. I'm sorry, a tablet of digoxin contains 250 micrograms. How would this be written in milligrams? Okay, so we're going to take the microgram and milligram conversion, and there are 1,000 micrograms in 1 milligram, and I want to end up with milligrams. So I'm going to take this conversion and I'm going to put the milligrams on top. So I'm going to do 1 milligram over 1,000 micrograms and multiply that by 250 micrograms. I can put it over 1 and make a fraction out of it. And now the micrograms are going to cancel, and I don't want them in my answer because I'm converting from micrograms to milligrams. And the milligram is on top. So this tells me to take the 250 and divide it by 1,000, which is going to give me 0.25 milligrams as my answer, because 250 divided by 1,000 is 0.25. So that's my answer, 0.25 milligrams. Okay, now let's look at page 98, number 30. And the problem says a physician orders 1,500 milligrams of cephalexin. Okay, 1,500 milligrams of cephalexin. And how many grams of cephalexin are in a 1,500 milligram dose? So it's basically saying 1,500 milligrams is equal to how many grams? So my conversion factor is 1,000 milligrams to 1 gram. Okay, there's the gram, there's the gram. I want to end up with gram. So I'm going to take this conversion factor here, and I'm going to put the 1 gram on top. 1 gram, because that's what I want to end up with, is 1,000 milligrams. And I'm going to multiply it by what they gave me, which is 1,500 milligrams. And I can put it over 1 and make a fraction out of it. My milligrams are going to cancel, which is good because I don't want them in my answer. 1 times 1,500 is 1,500 on top. Multiplying the bottom, 1,000 times 1 is 1,000. 1,500 divided by 1,000 is 1.5. And that has to be my answer because I'm solving for grams. So that equals 1.5 grams. Okay, so this tells you, do I multiply, do I divide? I don't know. If you're going from milligrams to grams, now we know that you would divide by 1,000.
Right, Professor, I'm here. I'm sorry, I'm late.
Hi.
My big doggy had a boo-boo in the an accident in the living room.
Oh, are they okay?
But anyway, yeah, like I remember saying, if you want a smaller number, you multiply.
Yes.
If you want a larger number, you divide, correct?
Right, and that confuses a lot of people because they think, well, if it's smaller, you need to divide because then you'll get a smaller number. But because it's smaller, you'll actually end up with more of them, so you would need to multiply.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at the post-test, which is on page 100, and the post-test goes from page 100 over to page 103. So it's like three pages and 6 more problems. So it's not too huge. Do you have you looked at the post-test yet?
Yes, I started it and I had a couple questions that I was a little confused, and it's
Okay.
the fluid drams and the fluid ounces.
Okay. Yeah, the fluid drams and the fluid ounces are confusing.
Number 5, number 6.
Okay. Number 5 is the grains to drams. Okay.
Right.
So if you look over on page 99 with the grains and the drams, it says that 1 dram is 60 grains. So let's look at number 5 on page 100. And going back to 99, it says 1 dram is equal to 60 grains. And this is in weight. And I've never used drams for weight. I've only used drams for liquid volume. So this is one that I actually had to look up that conversion because I'm not, I don't use it a lot. So going back to the question here, it says GRV equals dram blank. So this is 5 grains is equal to how many drams? So we look at this, 1 dram is 60 grains. I want to end up with drams, right? So I'm going to put the 1 dram over 60 grains. I'm not really insisting that you do all of your math using apothecary symbols because I don't. You know, I use GR for grains. I write out dram so that I don't have to keep drawing the funny little 3 symbol because it can get confusing. And, you know, like I said, you don't use it a lot in real life. You almost never use it except for grains in certain tablets. Okay, so I'm looking for drams. So I'm going to start with the 1 dram over 60 grains, and I'm going to multiply that by 5 grains. So even here, I'm taking my 5 grains and I'm moving it from Roman numerals into Arabic numerals because I don't like doing math with Roman numerals. I always convert them to Arabic numerals, do the math, and then you can convert them back later if you want. So there's the dram that I want to end up with. The grains are going to cancel. And that leaves me with 5 divided by 60. On my calculator, 5 divided by 60 is 0.08333 repeats. Okay, so it's going to be 0.08 drams. Okay, is that making sense?
Yes, I thought we had to write it like a fraction, so I wasn't too sure.
Yeah, you can write it as a fraction, and that's going to be what, 8 over 1,000, 10/100, no, 8 over 100, which is 4 over 50 or 2 over 25, right? Yeah, so you could do it that way, but honestly, if you're trying to write it in apothecary notation, that doesn't work that well because apothecary notation and using Roman numerals only has the half symbol, right? And that's nowhere near a half. So you would have to put it in fraction symbols anyway. So I really don't care. I would give you this as the correct answer. I'd give you that as the correct answer. I'd give you either one of these as the correct answer. You know, that's fine with me because I can see that you ended up with 5 over 60, which is, you know, what we're looking for. Okay. Oh, it should be 1/12, huh? Yeah, I was rounding here. This should be 1 over 12. Is that what you got for your answer? Okay, well, you did it correctly, Maribel. Did it more correctly than me. Good job. Okay, and then number 6, we're looking at the fluid drams and we're converting them to fluid ounces. Okay, so page 100, number 6. Okay, I don't know why I have less room than I had a minute ago. I think I changed the, okay. I'm still getting used to this tablet, so now all of a sudden the left side is too big. I'll fix it later. Okay, so it says fluid dram X. So FL, we're dram symbol X, which is the same thing as 10 drams, equals, and then it has the ounce symbol blank. So we're going to do it this way. And it's going to be fluid ounces. So fluid just tells you it's a liquid instead of a solid weight. So it's a volume instead of a weight. Okay, so going back to our conversion equivalency on page 99, it says that there are 8 fluid drams and 1 fluid ounce. Okay, so I want to end up with ounces. So I'm going to put the 1 ounce on top and 8 drams on the bottom. And I'm going to multiply, so I don't need the equal symbol. 10 drams. One of these days I will get used to this stylus. Okay, so I'm looking for ounces. So I've got ounces on top. Drams are going to cancel because I don't want them. This is going to give me my answer in ounces. 1 times 10 is 10. 8 times 1 is 8. It's going to give you 1 and 2/8, which is 1 and 1/4 ounces, which you can write using the apothecary symbol if you want to. And we don't have a Roman numeral for 1/4, so I wouldn't be writing it in apothecary notation because I don't have a Roman numeral for 1/4. So it should look something like that. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. The rest of this post-test gives you metric, apothecary, and household measurements. But it only converts within metric, apothecary, and household measurements. So chapter 6 gives you conversions between the measurements. So here's where the conversion sheet that I gave you kind of comes in handy. Page 106 gives you a bunch of conversions between apothecary, metric, and household measurements. So on page 106 at the bottom, you have a bunch of apothecary units on the left. In the middle, you have a bunch of household units, and on the right, you have all of the metric units. They can be quite confusing, and you don't have to memorize all of those. I've got the wrong mouse here. Okay. So you don't have to memorize. You don't have to memorize all of these units on page 106, okay, because there's a bunch of them, and honestly, we don't do that much apothecary. The apothecary you need to remember are the grains to milligrams, okay? So 1 grain is somewhere between 60 and 65 milligrams. So on page 107 in the middle, it says common medications dosed in grains and milligrams. Let me turn on my video here real quick. Okay, hi. Okay, this stylus is annoying me. Okay, so we're looking at chapter 6. Chapter 6 starts on page 104. And this is all about conversions. So we're either multiplying or dividing. All conversions are either multiply or divide. And on page 107, it gives you common medications that are dosed in milligrams and grains. And you'll see on the bottle of the medication, it'll give you both. So you don't necessarily have to memorize all of them because it'll tell you. Phenobarbital is a special case, and it also comes in strengths based on 64.8 milligrams per grain, which can be really confusing when, you know, okay, is it 60? Is it 64.8? Is it 65? It can be really confusing. So if we're talking about aspirin and Tylenol, we're always going to use 65, okay? Tylenol and aspirin, 1 grain equals 65 milligrams, okay? But if it's not Tylenol or aspirin, in most cases, we're going to use 60. So for codeine and nitroglycerin, we're going to use 60. Now, I'm not going to test you on that. I will tell you which one to use, all right? Because as you work with it, you'll start memorizing these things anyway. You might want to memorize these things before you take your national exam, though, because they may ask you how many milligrams are in a grain of Tylenol, 65, okay? What you're going to run into is 325 milligrams of aspirin or Tylenol. Aspirin is abbreviated ASA, which stands for acetyl salicylic acid. Tylenol is APAP, which stands for the chemical name of Tylenol, which is a long, huge name. The generic name of Tylenol is acetaminophen, but in Europe it's paracetamol, so that can be confusing too. Just aspirin or Tylenol, 325 milligrams is 5 grains, which is 1 regular strength tablet. So the extra strength is going to be 500 milligrams, which is 10 grains. It's not 10, it's a weird number. How much is that? Okay, well, never mind. It's 7.69 grains. And that's the extra strength. So the extra strength is not going to give you the grain anyway, because it comes out to 7.6 something or other. So that's, you know, it can get confusing. However, 1,000 milligrams is the like maximum dose for both of those things, or 2 extra strength tablets. And that's the maximum dose of one dose of those medications. In fact, they recommend that you take 2 regular strength instead of the extra strength. Okay, so let's look at practice problems A on page 107. And let's look at number 4. And number 4 says 1 pint equals blank milliliters. And the pint in the household units is about halfway down the conversion sheet on page 106. And it says that a pint is 473.2 milliliters, and then it has a slash and it says 480 milliliters. And then if you look at the really fine print at the bottom of that whole chart on page 106, the exact conversion is 1 pint equals 473.2 milliliters. The approximate value of 1 pint equals 480 milliliters, and that's often used in conversions because 1 pint is 16 ounces and 1 ounce is 30 milliliters. 1 pint equals 480 milliliters will be used in this text. So it's telling you what they're using in the text, okay? So another interesting note at the very bottom of page 106, an apothecary pound contains only 12 ounces, whereas a household pound contains 16 ounces, which is considered to be the equivalent of 454 grams. The apothecary pound is not used in this textbook. Okay, so you see how these things are different, and they don't always equate like exactly so many of this is equal to 1 of that. This is why if you go into a pub in Ireland and you order a pint, like if you order a pint of whatever, an IPA here, you're going to get 16 ounces. But if you order it in some pubs in Europe, you're going to get 12 ounces. So that's one reason why they can drink pints and, you know, and it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal because it's not necessarily a whole pint that we use here in the US. Okay, so some things we've kind of, we're ahead of the times, other ways we're behind the times, and, you know, who's more modern, I don't know. But in our case, what we're going to use here is 480 milliliters for a pint. Okay, so practice problems A show you, basically you're writing down those conversion factors. And then to actually convert them, now we're going to look farther into the questions here. Page 110 on practice problems B, it gives you a lot of household and apothecary conversions, and it says to calculate them using either ratio and proportion or dimensional analysis. Okay, so you can use either one. I don't care which one you use, but just realize that as we go farther on in the book, we're going to be using dimensional analysis, okay? Because it's going to be easier with a lot of, otherwise we'd have to do like 4 different ratio and proportion equations, and we can set them all up with one equation using dimensional analysis. Okay, page 113 is conversions between metric and apothecary systems. And then page 116 gives you a review. Okay, look on page 114, practice problems D. And let's look at number 1. It says acetaminophen. Anybody know what drug that is?
Tylenol.
It's Tylenol. Is equal to how many milligrams? So you have 5 grains is equal to how many milligrams? 5 grains is 1 regular strength Tylenol. We just talked about it right up here. So since it's Tylenol, we're going to use 65 milligrams to 1 grain. Okay, and since I'm looking for milligrams, I'm going to put the milligrams on top with the number, with its number, and since its number is 65, I'm going to do 65 milligrams and then multiply it by 5 grains. So even though it's written using apothecary notation here, I'm going to change that to the notation we're used to, which is 5GR instead of using Roman numerals, okay? And I want to know milligrams, so I'm going to put the milligrams on top. Now what I don't want is going to cancel out, which is the grains. They're going to cancel out. And this tells me to multiply 65 times 5 on my calculator. 65 times 5 is equal to what?
325.
325, and on the bottom I have 1. 1 times 1 is 1, so it's just 325 milligrams. Okay, hold on just a moment here. Sorry, I just got a funny text from my boss, and since she's my boss, I feel like I have to look at her text, so sorry. She is reminding all of her instructors that we want a drama-free environment, which cracks me up because I can think of nothing more boring and drama-free than you guys listening to me talk about math. I think it's pretty drama-free, don't you think? Okay, so that's pretty funny. It makes me wonder, what happened? I'll get all the chisme later. Okay, so one thing we want to look at on page 115 is coding. And that's on number 9, page 115, number 9, coding. And it says that GRSS with the lines over it is equal to blank milligrams. Okay, when we're looking at coding, at one point I had a math book that showed a clock. And it showed coding in minutes. Okay, so 60 milligrams is 1 grain. 30 milligrams is 1/2 grain or half an hour. 1/4 grain would be 15 milligrams. And this kind of made sense because it helps us, remember if it's a clock, there's going to be 60 minutes in an hour. So what does this mean here? GRSS.
Is that half a grain?
Yes, it's 1/2 grain. Very good. So 1/2 grain is going to be how many milligrams?
half, or do we write it 0.5?
Well, we want to know how many milligrams. So since it's coating, we're using 60 milligrams to 1 grain, right? So I'm going to put the milligrams on top because I want to end up with milligrams. And then I'm going to multiply it by this, which is 1/2 of a grain. So I'm going to put 0.5 because it's easier for me to put a decimal on top and a fraction, okay? Honestly, if you want to make a fraction 1/2, you can. So 60 times 0.5, and remember the grains are going to cancel because I don't want them. 60 times 0.5 is 30, right? Which gives me 30 milligrams. Okay, so then it tells you on number 9 that it's codeine. On number 1, it tells you it's acetaminophen. And number 6, though, it gives you a bunch of grains and it wants to know how many grams that is. So we want to be careful because get a color that we like. Because GR equals grain, G equals gram, and GM equals gram. Okay, so when we're looking at number 6, we're going from grains to gram. All right, so we want to be careful with that. We don't want to get those confused. Is that making sense? Okay, good. Let's see if I can move my screen a little bit. All right, that looks a little better for me. All right, so look at number 8, and this is a good one. Page 115. And it says NTG. And then it says SL. And then it has a GR. And 1/150 equals blank milligrams. And we're probably going, I have no idea what they're talking about, right? I know I have a grain. I know I have a milligram, but what's all the rest of that? Okay, so NTG is nitroglycerin. And if you look back, where were they talking about this at? Somewhere in this chapter, let me find it. Okay, on page 107, right in the middle, what does it say about NTG, where it says table 6.2, common medications dosed in grains and milligrams? Does anybody know?
60 per 1 grain, 60 milligrams per 1 grain.
Yes. So NTG is nitroglycerin, and that's the drug. SL is sublingual, so it's a little tablet that goes under the tongue, or it could be a spray. They have a spray also. And nitroglycerin is in dynamite, right? And did we talk about this last week, how they discovered it, that it was good for the heart? So yes. It opens up the blood vessels, right? So when patients are having chest pain and it feels like their heart is being squeezed, they put this little tiny 1/150th of a grain tablet under their tongue, right? And then it opens it up and it helps with their chest pain. And if they do this like 3 times, then they need to call 911 if it doesn't help by then, right? Because if they take one, wait 5 minutes, take another one, wait 5 minutes, and they do that 3 times, that's 15 minutes. So they need to call and make sure they're not having a heart attack. So it says that there are 60 milligrams in 1 grain. And I want to end up with milligrams, right? So I'm going to put the milligrams on top. Now, here's the hard part. I'm putting the 150 on the bottom. It's not necessarily hard, but it looks weird. And I sometimes get asked, why are you doing that? Well, this means 1 grain divided by 150, right? So here's what I have for 1/150th of a grain. I have 1 grain on top and it's divided by 150. Okay, so I'm going to put the milligrams on top because that's what I'm looking for. The grains are going to cancel. So this tells me to take the 60 and divide it by 150. So when you punch that into your calculator, you're going to get a repeating decimal. 60 divided by 150. Oh, I got 0.4 milligrams. And sometimes I'll get 0.39999 depending on how I do it. Okay, so my answer there is 0.4 milligrams. Okay, is that making sense? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Now look at number 11. Number 11 goes the other way with it, doesn't it? Number 11 is NTG SL 0.3 milligrams equals how many grains? And it puts the grain in front of the number like it properly should. I tend to write this the way I do math. So I put the grain at the end. It doesn't really matter which way you write it. I'm not going to take points off as long as, my main thing is, can you do the math, right? Okay, so we're still using 1 grain equals 60 milligrams. So this time I'm looking for grains. So I'm going to put the 1 grain on top and the 60 milligrams on the bottom, and then multiply by what I have, which is 0.3 milligrams. Okay, and now I'm going to put it over 1 just to make it a fraction. And my milligrams are going to cancel. And what I'm looking for here I'm highlighting the wrong things here. Oh, great, I just erased it. I completely lost it now, you guys, sorry. Okay. So milligrams are going to cancel. I want to end up with grains. There we go. So 0.3 divided by 60. This is going to give you a weird decimal, isn't it? Okay, 0.005. And in grains, they're looking, in this particular problem, we're looking for the way that nitroglycerin writes it, which is 1 over a number, right? So what I have here is 5 over, there's the tenths, hundredths, 1,000ths place, 5 over 1,000. And if I divide 5 in the top, I get 1. And 1,000 divided by 5 is what?
200.
200. So that's my answer, 1 over 200. Because it's nitroglycerin. Now, if it was any other drug, the answer would be 0.005 grains. But since it's nitroglycerin, we're looking for 1 over 200. So there's 3 strengths of nitroglycerin. And I have to tell you guys, it's often easier just to memorize the 3 strengths. So we already know that 1 over 150 is 0.4. And now we know that 1 over 200 is 0.3. And the other one is 1/300. Which is 0.2 milligrams. Okay, so these are the strengths that are available of nitroglycerin. And if you memorize those things, look at it this way. We have 150, 200, and 300. So the numbers on the bottom get bigger, and then the decimals get smaller. So 1/150 is 0.4, 1/200 is 0.3, and 1/300 is 0.2. So if you memorize those numbers, then you can draw your little chart if you want, and you'll end up, you know, not having to do the math. But doing the math is, you know, you need to be able to do that too. So you won't find, as far as I know, you won't find any other drug that uses grain with a fraction like that, okay? There are some drugs that are a half grain, but they're not going to be like 1/200. If you look at the bottom on page 115, where it says the tech note, your technician notes are usually pretty helpful, and there's some in every chapter. I would read those notes because they're very common sense. It says nitroglycerin sublingual tablets are available in 3 strengths, which are ordered in either milligrams or grains. It's a good idea to learn the strength conversions to verify that your conversion calculations are correct. Okay. So